Think we're on. This thing works. You owe me a Jolly Rancher. I'm tired. Okay, let me see where I'm going. Okay. So I need to zoom somehow or another, right? That ain't it. There we go. All right, so now you can see it on the video. Okay, and then I'm going to this stuff. Okay, so let's take a look at what the review sheet says. So we're going Wilson here. All right, I think it starts with Wilson. Let me see if it scoot up a little bit. There it is. So there's the first thing. So Roosevelt got mad at Taft, if you remember, way back when at the beginning of the end of the progressive era, for not being progressive enough. So he runs against Taft and he forms the Bull Moose Party. And because you got a third party, the two Republican candidates, Roosevelt and Taft, split the vote. So Wilson gets elected. So there he is. He's this real idealistic guy that doesn't really like to compromise. We know that that's going to kind of get him when it comes time to negotiate the Treaty of Versailles or when he tries to get the United States to join the League of Nations. Okay, let's take the review sheet here. So he's got, hey, on that first slide, Roosevelt got shot, then he gave the speech during the campaign, even though he got shot. New Freedom is Wilson's pro-business platform. So he's progressive, but he's not going to use a big government like maybe Teddy Roosevelt or later Franklin Roosevelt. He's going to try to help small business. If you go down here, Wilson is terrible on civil rights. Remember, he thought the Birth of a Nation, this video about the Klan, was good. So like the big time make statement on the progressive movement is they were all pretty weak on civil rights, especially Wilson. Okay, so now we start getting into like the foreign policy, and so Wilson was going to be the nice guy president concerning Latin America, so he was going to try to persuade Latin American countries to do the right thing, to be pro-American rather than invade, but he ends up invading Latin American countries just as much as Roosevelt or Taft had, in particular Mexico, and he's going to be chasing Pancho Villa around Mexico when Pancho Villa kills Americans. So, and the context was like the Mexican Revolution. So let's see if we find something along those lines here. Some slides that go with that. This is kind of the pro-business, the New Freedom stuff. So there it is, missionary diplomacy. He's going to be less aggressive. But he ends up sending in troops quite a few places. And then there's the Mexico story. That's Pancho Villa. And so the big World War I general prior to the war is hanging out in Mexico chasing Pancho Villa around. All right, if we go back to the review sheet. So now you're getting into World War I causes. Whoops, wrong dang thing. Let's go that way. All right. And we got to skip way down past this big review of something that we did. And then here we go, World War I. So you got cause of the wars itself. You got the isms, nationalism, militarism, imperialism, and the alliance system. The alliances of the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. And then you have a chain of events kind of set off when Ferdinand gets killed. Francis Ferdinand. Okay, so you got your war going. So the two sides in the war are the Allies and the Central Powers, France, Britain, and Russia. So our side's the Allies. Central Powers are Germany and Austria-Hungary. Wilson tries very hard to be neutral. Okay, let's go back to the review sheet. So there's what we've said. So the U.S. entry, you're going to have three causes. If you remember, so he gets elected, re-elected, saying he's keeping us out of the war, but then you got Lusitania gets sunk, sinking Lusitania, with Americans on board. And then the Zimmerman telegram, letter to Mexico saying, join the war on our side, we'll help you out, and the unrestrained submarine warfare. And so Wilson feels like he doesn't have a choice but to go to war. And remember, he's going to call the war to end all wars, to make the world safe for democracy, And his 14-point speech is how the world ought to look after the war, a whole bunch of main points. And it's kind of the opposite of the cause of the war. You know, no alliances, no militarism, no imperialism, no Lusitanias. You got freedom of the seas, self-determination. You know, the League of Nations is going to try to protect that. So we're fighting for noble reasons. There's our buddy Eugene Debs there. All right, let's take a look at the review sheet. Okay. So you're now looking at the war at home a little bit. So the next thing's on World War I at home. And remember, we kind of did a little compare and contrast. So the unions don't go on strike. They're supposed to be cooperating. Big Bill Haywood and the IWW went on strike. Debs supported a strike. But the AFL, the American Federation of Labor, was a more moderate union and didn't go on strike. The Great Migration is going, and so African Americans are moving north. Racial tensions increase in the north as well. All right, as a result of their help in the war effort, women get the right to vote after the war's over. Hoover's going to do the voluntary rationing for whatever reason. I don't know why. There's not a slide from World War II, but the rationing in World War II is going to be mandatory rationing. And so the rationing in the wars, World War I, World War II, kind of reflects the outlook of Hoover and Roosevelt, you know, concerning economics as well. So Hoover wants to get businesses to voluntarily hire people and not lay people off, whereas Roosevelt's going to, you know, use the government to help people to do things, and there's no, like, choice involved in those programs. The government's just going to do it. All right, let's go back to the review sheet, see what we got. So then you're going to have a draft. It's a wartime draft during World War I, and then here comes Harding. Harding, remember we had that cute little word about him. He's an amiable boob. And I think we move over to this one all the way up to the top. And there he is, our old buddy, the amiable boob. So he's very, you know, the 20s president is going to be very conservative, anti-progressive, anti-government intervention in the economy, pro-business. And so you got here the scandals during the Harding years rivaling those during the Grant years. The Attorney General selling liquor permits during Prohibition. Oil being sold that's supposed to be reserved for the Navy being sold to oil companies by the Interior Secretary. All right. And then there's those war treaties. So the 4, the 5, the 9, we did a pretty good job with that. 4 was about not messing with each other's empires. The 5 is the big one that Japan's going to resent because their Navy stays little. Then the 9 power is about keeping the door open in China to trade. All right, I'm going to go over here and check the review sheet. All right, Kellogg-Briand Pact. Kellogg-Briand Pact, that was outlawing war. All right. I don't know. The Coolidge quotes, America's business is business. The man who builds a factory builds a temple. The man who works there worships there. And if you go back, is this it? Here it is. And so we're looking kind of, there's that money flow. Remember, Germany owes the Allies money, so they borrow it from us. The Allies pay us back, and the money's going this way. Germany's in terrible shape after inflation because they owe everybody money and they're just printing money after the war. Okay, and then you're going to get Hoover going, right? So Hoover's this nice guy. He fed people. He's the food secretary during World War I. Inspirational story, and things look great for him when he gets elected president in 1928. But then you got the high tariff, and he's trying to help farmers, but you got the high tariff. Holy smoot. That's going to be bad for our trade. And then you got the crash. So there's the cause of the crash. Speculation, that's short-term investment. Buy low, sell high, buying on margin. That is borrowing money to invest in the stock market. A lot of people lost a lot of money, unemployment going way up. You got the runs on the banks and suicides going up. All right. There's the Depression. So the Depression's got the four causes: tick, TICC, the tariff, inequality, crash, and credit buying. During the 20s, people were borrowing money to buy stuff. All right, unemployment gets to 25%, 60% malnutrition. All those banks are closing. Folks really struggling. We read the article about all the different what the Depression did to people. Okay, let's take a look at what we have next. So Depression, social fabric. Manhood is challenged. The man's at home and he can't take care of the family. You see it on Grapes of Wrath. So the guys ride the rails. They hang out outside the house, and women are kind of taking over. So it's it's not only the concrete stuff, but also the problem of self-respect for all these folks. All right, the RFCs, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, the government under Hoover is making loans to banks and businesses, not direct aid to people. So the big contrast between Roosevelt and Hoover is Roosevelt's using the government. Hoover kind of wants the aid to be indirect to banks or businesses or to feed the animals somehow or another, rather than direct aid to the poor people. Eleanor Roosevelt, we kind of know, is the conscience of the New Deal. She's much more pro-civil rights than Roosevelt was. He was a real practical thinker and didn't want to alienate the white South. All right, so if we work our way up, making some decent headway here. Here we go. Boom. All right, so there's kind of the indirect aid. They do build the Hoover Dam. That's a massive public works program. Okay, let's keep going. There's the bonus army. They're setting up a Hooverville outside Washington, and MacArthur, who we learned about in the last day or two, is the island hopping guy, is going to attack the bonus army. All right, you get the beginning of this pattern with aggression going unchecked, starting with Japan invading Manchuria. Okay, and then we work our way on down. All right, so Roosevelt, he's got polio, and somehow or another that polio and that suffering made him more compassionate. There's Eleanor, the conscience of the New Deal. He calls it the New Deal in his convention speech in 1932. Okay, let's see what we have next. So the 3 R's of the New Deal: relief, recovery, reform. Where are we? There it is. There it is. All right, so relief is to ease suffering. He's going to do a banking holiday right away to stop the banking runs, and most of the stuff he passes in the first 100 days, and then later on, like Social Security during the second New Deal. But the 3 R's, relief to ease suffering, like the FERA, is especially that sort of thing. All right, the recovery, it's all the work programs, I'd say, to end the Depression. The CCC, PWA, CWA, WPA, and then reform, the FDIC, Social Security, things to make sure that the Depression, the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, make sure you don't have another Depression. All right. There's the CCC, the one that he likes so much because it serves so many purposes. It gets those guys out of trouble in the cities, and it gives them money and self-respect. Okay. Big review sheet, trying to go kind of quick. If I hit 40 minutes, it gets longer to record for us. All right, so the FDIC, the key letters are insuring bank deposits, so your money is safe. The banking holiday, he closes the banks for a few days, and when they reopen, he does a fireside chat where he assures everybody that the banks are now safe so you can keep your money there. Fireside chats, that is the radio speeches. He says, my friends, at the beginning of it. Everybody kind of gathers around, feels like they got somebody on their side. Okay, the relief programs, the FERA, the CWA was part of that, so it's direct money to the states. So let's go over here and see if we got some programs that match this up. So there it is. All right, so the AAA is paying the farmers not to grow their stuff, so that's going to jack up the prices of the crops. HOLC is one of the one of the things that's making loans to folks to buy homes. Homelessness was a big problem in the cities. That's why you got the Hoovervilles. All right, first of the public works programs, part of the FERA was the CWA. Okay, those are the three. So there's that word. Somebody who kind of whips up anger against the government and blames the problems on something else. So Coughlin was kind of Hitlerish, blamed Jews. Long in Louisiana, he's going to be the guy who blames the rich. And Townsend, not really a demagogue, he's just coming up with the idea that it's going to become Social Security. See what we have. So those are those guys. All right, the FHA, that's another organization still around making loans so people can buy homes. That was one of the things, along with the VA that's making loans when people are buying houses in the suburbs over here, right down here. Okay, once again, the sheet feels big, but I also feel like we're making decent progress here. All right, so the WPA is the biggest of the public works programs, lasts the longest. Steinbeck worked for it as a dog counter, but mostly it's construction jobs all over the country. The Dust Bowl, the guys are in Oklahoma. The farms are blowing away. They're losing their farms, and so they're moving out to California looking for work. Grapes of Wrath is about that. So, Securities and Exchange Commission. So this is regulating the stock market, making sure you don't buy on margin so that you're not going to have people losing all their money on the stock market. Cheap Power in Tennessee. The TVA, Social Security, we know is for pensions, but also remember unemployment and disability checks. The Wagner Act, I need a T here, don't I? Is the law that's protecting unions. It's also called the National Labor Relations Act. And so going on strike is forever after protected. And the Fair Labor Standards Act is setting a minimum wage, maximum hours, no child labor on the national level. All right, let's go back over and take a look at it. All right. So there's the WPA, 9 million jobs, not just construction jobs, writers, artists as well. The NRA is the one that gets declared unconstitutional. It's the Blue Eagle. There's the Dust Bowl. There's the SEC there. All right. TVA and Social Security. Wagner Act. Labor-friendly government. Protecting unions. Fair Labor Standard Act. Minimum wage. Okay. He gets reelected. Does the court packing scheme to protect the New Deal. And then you're kind of assessing the New Deal. So Keynes was the guy that said you spend more money than you're taking in if times are tough. So you cut taxes and you spend more money on Social Security and government programs. And then what he said, when times get better, you can raise taxes and cut spending. Politicians, generally speaking, don't do that. All right, then you're assessing the New Deal. So bad duck was the criticism. The government's growing too big. It's incoherent. You got the FHA, the HOLC, the WPA, PWA, all these different government agencies trying to do the same thing. Debt starts growing. It's the war that ends the Depression, not the New Deal. Government programs are seen as undermining the work ethic, and there's really, still, like the progressives, there's no real civil rights legislation. That's coming in the 60s, coming out of World War II. All right, it spells out mesh or fesh, the defense. He's feeding people, preventing mass starvation. There's less of a gap between the rich and the poor. All those guys working for the CCC and all the men that get the jobs feel better about themselves. There's not a communist revolution because steps are taken to provide a safety net for folks. And, the kind of phrase I like is he's using big government, what Hamilton wanted, to help out the common man. All right, there they are. And look at there, we are on the way to World War II. All right, let's go over here to the review sheet. I don't know how I might manage to move this fast. All right, so the good neighbor policy. Roosevelt wants to be nicer to Latin America. He's got a depression going on, so he's not going to be feeling imperialist. And then when the bad guys are on the move, Hitler and Mussolini taking over places, Congress says, no, we're not getting involved with that. They're feeling isolation, so they passed 3 separate neutrality acts. Okay, because we're isolationists. Britain and France licking their wounds from World War I. Nobody stands up to the bad guys. When Hitler says he wants the Sudetenland, they call the meeting at Munich, where they give him his way. So if we go over here, there's the good neighbor policy. Hitler's building up, and 3 separate neutrality acts by the Congress. So here's like stuff. So this pattern, the bad guys win in Spain. Japan takes over the rest of China. Nobody does anything. Hitler's building up the military. He invades Austria. So there's Munich. He demands the Sudetenland. That's this right here, because the dagger aimed at the heart of Germany. And so there's the stupid guy from World War II, Neville Chamberlain, Prime Minister of Britain, shaking hands with him. He comes home and says, we've got peace in our time. But then, of course, Hitler continues to do his thing. Hitler signs the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact with Stalin, and then they kind of divide up Poland, and World War II is declared by Britain and France once Poland is invaded. All right, let's check the review sheet, see how we're doing. All right, non-aggression pact. Okay, so now Roosevelt is moving away from neutrality. First, cash and carry. You got to buy it, send your boat over, buy it, bring it back. There it is. All right. Roosevelt's record on the Holocaust is ugly. He didn't do enough about it. You had that boat, the St. Louis, who came over, and because Jews had already hit their quota, their immigration quota, they weren't allowed to come here. All right. Poland fell to, so the Blitzkrieg, Poland falls, so it's using tanks and planes. So the warfare is much more aggressive. The offense wins. And then he turns around and takes over France in less than a month. Okay, so you had cash and carry. You go down here, so it's the destroyer deal. You're trading destroyers for naval bases, and it may have been illegal. Meanwhile, Britain's fighting, the Royal Air Force is fighting off the Luftwaffe, the Nazi Air Force, and fighting them to a standstill. So you got that quote from Churchill. Okay, so then the last part of the unneutrality is Lend-Lease. We're just going to give them the stuff they can pay us back later. That makes the United States the arsenal of democracy. Meanwhile, Roosevelt's getting elected for a record 3rd term. All right, let's check the review sheet. See where we're at. Looking pretty good. All right, just kind of got to fight this war, right? All right, so there's the Blitzkrieg. Dunkirk. Dunkirk, the place on the beach where the British folks get away, and there's the Battle of Britain. The Royal Air Force, the RAF, fights off the Luftwaffe. So Hitler turns around and invades the Soviet Union. He couldn't be satisfied. And that's not going to be good for him because this guy's going to get stuck in the Russian winter where it's so cold. All right. Let me see what it's going to look like. Where are we? All right. Okay, so you're really getting the United States getting involved here. Last couple of days worth of stuff. All right, so let's see what we can do. So, hey, they're sinking our ships. So we officially, the Nazis are, so we officially in neutrality. Then along comes Pearl Harbor. So Japan had invaded Indochina. So we put an embargo on all that stuff they need for their war machines. We didn't think the attack was going to come in Hawaii because Hawaii is not close to Japan, but they hit us December 7, 1941. Early in the morning, Sunday morning, the battleships, 8 battleships destroyed, not the aircraft carriers, which are out to sea. That's going to help us win the Battle of Coral Sea and Midway later on. Just keep going with it. So then the strategy is to get the Germans first. They're more of a threat. And so you're the war at home. So the immigrants are unified. There are no new immigrants during World War II. You got the internment camps. The guy Korematsu sued, says unconstitutional, but the Supreme Court upheld it. Their reparations passed 1988. I imagine Rosie's coming up. The war spending is going to end the New Deal. Got that amazing statistic, twice as much money from 41 to 45 as from 1776 to 1941. Taxes are high, the debt goes way up. So there she is. All right. Got the Bracero program for Mexican farm workers to replace, the Jodes out there in California. Rosie the Riveter is married. So we're seeing today that she, for the most part, she might get a secretary job after the war, maybe a nurse or a teacher. Most likely she's going to move home and raise kids as part of the baby boom. Civil rights, you got the Double V campaign. A. Philip Randolph threatened to march on Washington. So to head that off, Roosevelt integrated defense industries, though not the military. African Americans are fighting against racism abroad and at home, and so the civil rights movement kind of coming out of World War II. Okay, you got the code talkers there. The Nazis never could break American codes, Native American codes. The Zoot Suit riots, rationing's going on. It's forced rationing that Roosevelt does, and the sailors resent how much thread is being used in these suits here. So you had riots there on the West Coast between sailors and. All right, get some famous pictures there. Those are all good pictures. All right, but we're fighting in the Pacific. So Japan makes some headway, but then you've got the battles fought on the aircraft carriers. Let's see if we're matching up pretty good. Yep. So the first one's going to be Coral Sea, and the second one's going to be Midway. Midway is going to be the turning point, also fought with aircraft carriers. So then MacArthur, our buddy from the bonus army, comes up with the island hopping strategy because you don't want to fight the Japanese on all these islands. When we get close enough, we can start bombing Japan. Okay. Meanwhile, in the European theater, Rommel gets defeated in North Africa, so you kind of have the first and a half front, but fighting against both Nazis and Italians. And the Soviets are starting to do better against the Nazis in the Soviet Union. Okay, so at Tehran, D-Day is planned. That's the official second front, so that the Germans will have to split up their army. The date of it is June 6, 1944. You got the landing craft. You got Eisenhower giving the inspirational speech to the guys he knows he's sending to their death. Okay, let's hit the review sheet. And we work our way down. Look at that. Not much. D-Day right there. All right. Come back to that. So Roosevelt gets elected a fourth time. The Battle of the Bulge is Hitler's last big attack. And so then the U.S. and Soviet troops meet in Germany. We said today or yesterday that Roosevelt died in Warm Springs while posing for his picture. Hitler commits suicide about 18 days later, so May 8th, 1945 is VE Day, victory in Europe. So VJ Day, September 2nd, 1945, we're firebombing Tokyo, so a lot of civilian casualties before the atomic bomb. Islands close to Japan, Iwo Jima and Okinawa, that picture's from Iwo Jima. Famous propaganda photo, military photo, and then the kamikazes are suicide soldiers, either bombers or banzai warriors killing themselves at Okinawa. So what do we do about how many deaths it would take to invade Japan? Well, we're dropping the atomic bomb. Manhattan Project had dropped one out in New Mexico. Einstein and Oppenheimer there, so Truman finds out about it and was very pro-atomic bomb. Felt like the atomic bomb was saving lives. Also kind of impressed the Soviets when he finds out about it at Potsdam. So you got some kind of atomic diplomacy going on there. All right, and boom, look at that. So we are left with, what does the review sheet say? Baby boom, economic boom in the suburbs. All right, so today's stuff. The GI Bill, very successful, getting these guys reacclimated. You got this economic boom where you got a lot of consumer goods, you got houses in the suburbs, you got a lot of TVs. And so the 4 reasons for it: military spending, cheap oil, rising productivity, and education. Okay? And then we go, Dr. Spock is giving advice on raising babies because mama lives far away from grandma. People are moving to the south and the west as opposed to the industrial section of the country. FHA loans and VA loans are used. And the interstate is used to get folks out to the suburbs. First big suburb was Levittown. Leads to white flight, and so whites in the northern cities are fleeing to the suburbs. And so you kind of get some urban decay that we're familiar with coming out of that story. All right, let's see what we got. I think that's it. Okay, and let's see what we got. Let's check out. I feel pretty good about the minutes, don't you?